I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Board of Water Commissioners for the Weir River Water System. And I'll read the preliminary announcement that this meeting is being held remotely as an alternate means of public access pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, temporarily amending certain provisions of the open meeting law. You are hereby advised that this meeting and all communications during this meeting may be recorded by the Town of Hingham in accordance with the open meeting law. If any participant wishes to record this meeting, please notify the chair at the start of the meeting in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, so that the chair may inform all other participants of said recording. So is anyone else recording the meeting other than the Town of Hingham? I don't believe so. The members of the board participating this evening are Bill Ramsey and myself, Joe Fisher. Liz Klein is unavailable this evening. First item on our agenda is approval of minutes, and I believe there is only one set of minutes that is up for approval this evening, and that would be the minutes from May 6, 2021.
With that, then I'd make a motion to approve the minutes dated May 6, 2021.
I second that motion. All in favor? Bill?
Aye.
Joe? Aye. They are approved. Minutes are approved. Next item on our agenda is to appoint Jon Asher as historian to the Board of Water Commissioners for the purpose of preparing and filing a report regarding the Town of Hingham's acquisition of the Hingham Water Company. Tom Mayo, would you like to introduce this for us?
Great, happy to. Thank you, Joe. So back in, I think it was 2018 or so, when the acquisition was in full swing, the process, I believe Chair Paul Healy at the time had recommended that, you know, if this acquisition were to move forward, then the town really should be documenting the process that was taking place, as this is going to have been an historic process for the town, one of the larger, certainly, acquisitions the town would ever undertake. So at that point, I believe the sitting chair at the time of the Water Company Acquisition Study Committee, Mr. Asher, began to dutifully, as he always does, document and keep track of all records, et cetera. And to that end, I think, and in keeping with, I think, Chair Healy's recommendation, it would make sense to start the process of documenting before we get too far out from the actual acquisition process. And now that we're through the transition as well, that we start to document the actual ramp up to and the town meeting, of course, itself, and then the acquisition and the transition that occurred post town meeting. So I think that's the idea here, is that we just try to have someone that was involved help us document and identify what actually happened for posterity's sake.
I mean, I think that's important for the town. We need to be able to go back and to look back and understand what we did, why we did, and use that as a basis for moving forward. So, Mr. Asher, thank you so much for being willing to do that. And I believe you're on mute, but would you like to say any words about your responsibilities should you be elected as the historian to the Board of Water Commissioners? And that would not make you an historic relic. That would actually make you someone who would be documenting the history for us. I just want to clarify that. So, John, if you want to say a few words, that'd be great.
There are probably other things that make me a historic relic, but no, I would be honored to do it. I've certainly acquired over 7 or 8 years a tremendous amount of source material, and kind of on Tom's point, and I think Paul Healy's point, Chair Healy at the time, it was such a significant undertaking over a long period of time, and with a great many people participating in various capacities, that I think it is definitely worthwhile trying to assemble it as a history, and also, to your point, Joe, as a model for addressing other complex decisions as the town goes forward. So I think it has both a forward-looking aspect to it as well as a historic one. And I will work vigorously to complete it. And I realize that the 1-year anniversary of the town's acquisition is in the not too distant future. I think July 31 of this year would be the 1-year anniversary, and I'll do my best to complete it by that point in time.
That's terrific. One thing, Tom, you did not mention is the level of compensation associated with this position.
I've offered to double John's salary from when he was the chair of the Acquisition Study Committee. John, so this would be an temporary unpaid position.
So thank you. And this is really a case where the compensation is in no way related to the value of what you're providing. So really, we appreciate it. Bill, did you have any comments, questions, or concerns?
I did. John, thank you for stepping up to do this. You helped the town in so many different capacities, and I can't thank you enough for doing this and for all of your help with other areas of the town, whether it's veteran services or budget advice. Just thank you for all you do.
Great. Thank you. My pleasure.
Any members of the public have comments or questions on this matter? Seeing none and hearing none, Bill, I will take a motion on this.
I make a motion to appoint Jon Asher as historian to the Board of Water Commissioners in the capacity of a temporary and uncompensated employee under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 258, Section 1, and to authorize and direct said historian to prepare and file with the Board of Water Commissioners a report documenting the Town of Hingham's acquisition of the Hingham Water Company under the provisions of Chapter 139 of the Acts of 1879 and Article 10 of the 2019 Town of Hingham Annual Town Meeting and all other applicable laws.
I will second that motion. Now we vote. How do you vote, Bill?
Aye.
Joe Fisher, aye. It is carried. So, John, does this mean that you will be the only person who has a firsthand recollection of the acts of 1879? Is that where we're going with this?
There will be others that are more when I get done. Yep.
Really, I really can't thank you enough. This is so important to the town, and not just to Hingham, to the 3 towns that are associated with this. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Next item on the agenda is we're going to take up the Weir River Water System proposed fiscal year 2022 water rates. It's really an important topic for the town. And this is actually, I believe, the first time that this board is acting in the capacity with respect to setting rates. So, what I'd like to do is to take the opportunity to provide some more context for the 10% water rate increase that is being proposed, and address some questions and concerns that were raised when the notice was made public. I'm going to ask the town administrator and the assistant town administrator and our water superintendent and the chair of the Water Transition and Evaluation Committee to walk through some slides and provide more information around the proposed rate increase. But before I do, I want to clarify several broad points, and then I'm going to leave it to others to go into some specifics. In the years leading up to the acquisition vote, which was in 2019, the town consistently set the expectation that we would increase rates by 10% every 3 years. And this assumption was built into the town's financial modeling and remains part of our recent 10-year financial projections. A 10% increase once every 3 years would be lower and slower than Aquarion's historical increases. The last rate increase was in 2018, when Aquarion requested a 14% increase, and ultimately the DPU approved a 12% increase plus a 2% MRAN addition. That's the that surcharge is the for main replacement and adjustments. It was the, I guess, the capital improvement additional 2% that Aquarion built in. There was no rate increase in fiscal year 20, no rate increase in fiscal year 21. The town held the rate steady for the first year of our operation after taking control of the water system on July 30th of 2020. So now we are approaching that third year, and we are proposing a 10% increase for fiscal year 22 with the expectation to hold those rates steady for the next 3 years. A rate table that will be presented online that is currently available at the Weir River Water System website still reflects Aquarion's rate structure. As I said, we held rate steady for the first year of municipal ownership, and that's following 2 years after the prior rate increase. And we received several comments about how confusing the rate structure is and the 7 different charges on water bills that people see on their invoices. And we share that view. We, the board, share that view. And that's one of the reasons we are currently undertaking a cost of service study with the Abrahams Group right now. That study will result in a simplified rate structure going forward and will give us a better handle on the revenue and expenses needed to support the water system. We also need to keep in mind the water system is an enterprise fund. The proposed rate increase is part of the plan to keep the water system self-sufficient. Town meeting approved the fiscal year 2022 budget, water budget in this past May. And as part of our rules and regulations, the Board of Water Commissioners is now meeting to formally adopt the rates for the upcoming fiscal year. Our mantra leading up to the acquisition was slower and lower rate increases. We did not commit to reducing rates, at least in the early years, because we made a commitment to keeping ratepayer dollars in the water system by aggressively investing in capital improvements. And that is in fact what we are doing. The town's financial models include investing at least $2.7 million each year in water system capital improvements, incrementing that amount by 5% every 3 years going forward. This is up from the prior owner's capital investment of approximately $1.5 million per year. The town is also working with an engineering firm to conduct a water system master plan that will evaluate the entire water system and inform our capital improvement plan through the year 2035. We are taking a thoughtful and strategic approach to planning our investments in the water system. The lower, slower 10% increase we are proposing now is based on extensive financial projections. It is in line with what we told the community leading up to the acquisition and is necessary to support ongoing water system operations and capital improvements. I'd like to turn the meeting, this part of the meeting, over to the town administrator, Tom Mayo, who will then lead us through the various aspects of our analysis that resulted in the 10% proposed water rate increase. Tom.
Thank you very much, Joe. So Michelle will open a presentation, and a combination of Michelle and Jim and Russ will walk us through some slides that put a little bit of color to, I think, a lot of the points that you just made, Joe. So with that, I'll turn it over to Michelle.
Thank you, Tom and Joe. So let's see if I can just get the right view here. All right, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, thank you. So just to reiterate some of the points that Joe just mentioned, we wanted to walk through a lot of the commitments that the town made leading up to the acquisition process and the expectations that we set with the community. So the first two, as Joe mentioned, were that through our financial modeling and projections, we were going to have lower and slower rate increases than under private ownership. And that is really the 10% rate increase we had been planning for to occur once every 3 years. And as Joe said, the last rate increase was approved in 2018, so that was FY19. And now as we come up to FY22, that is the 3rd year in the cycle. So that's what we're planning to stick with for now. We also talked a lot about how the water system should be an enterprise fund, which means that it needs to be self-sufficient. So water revenues should cover water expenditures, and that's also a key factor in all of our financial planning for the system. As Joe mentioned, we are undertaking 2 major studies right now in our 1st year of ownership. We're doing the cost of service study, which will give us a better sense, a better handle on the revenue and expenses necessary to support the system, as well as simplify or clean up the rate structure so that it's easier for everyone to understand. We're also undertaking a capital master plan, and Russell will talk a little bit more about that. But that's going to evaluate the infrastructure of the entire system and help us inform our capital improvements and investments going forward over the next 10 plus years. One of the benefits that we highlighted in the process leading up to acquisition of public ownership was having a more transparent and public rate setting process. And we'll walk through exactly what that process will look like starting every fall at the end of this presentation. As Joe mentioned, we're aggressively making capital investments to address the aging water system. I believe it was in 2018 when the previous owner testified before a DPU that the average age of mains in the system was 64 years old, with 32% of the mains being over 70 years old and 18% of the mains being over 100 years old. So we have a lot of aging infrastructure that we need to take care of here, and that's what we're doing by reinvesting ratepayer dollars in the system. We also talked about having better coordination with our road paving operations. So Russell's in daily and weekly contact with the Hingham, Hull, and Cohasset DPWs, as well as with utility providers, so that when we open a road, we're only doing it once, and we're trying to address any issues underground with pipes and infrastructure that need to be addressed at that time, so that we're not then reopening roads after we've paved them in the future. And then finally, a lot of what we talked about in the pre-acquisition process was kind of leading towards these ultimate goals of over time reducing discolored water incidents and reducing unaccounted for water, which everyone's paying for. So by making a lot of these capital investments and addressing the aging infrastructure, it would help rectify some of these problems. I'm going to turn it over to Jim Taylor, who can walk through a little bit more of the history of how we got here.
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, I was asked to, presently I'm the chair of the Water Company Transition and Evaluation Committee. We've been assisting in the process of the transition, and then moving forward, we'll be part of the group that will look at the governance structure to see if it's an appropriate structure moving forward. I've been asked to provide a little bit of background and maybe a little bit of history, not to step on Jon Asher's toes too much, but on a very high level, we're just going to remind the folks how we got here today. So as we know, back in 2012 was when the actual acquisition process began, where the town, based on a couple of recent, at that time, recent high rate increases, chose to look into the feasibility of actually acquiring the water company. Just to remind folks, Aquarian instituted a 23.42% increase in rates in 2009. And then in 2012, again, 3 years later, asked for an additional 18.7% rate increase. And that really started the process of the town moving forward, looking at the potential and possibility of acquiring the water company. During that time period, significant financial analysis was done, as was indicated by Joe previously. That analysis included some assumptions, one of which we heard in the 2011 rate study, where Aquarian indicated it was their practice and their plan to increase rates every 3 years. While we didn't see that specifically in Hingham and Hull during the time period, in fact, they skipped one series of time frames, which we can talk about. We saw that in other parts of their ownership, in both in Connecticut and New Hampshire, the rates were typically increased every 3 years, and that was built into our model. The second part of our model that was kind of a critical component of the financial model was looking at the rate of investment, capital investment into the system. It was clear that the capital investment was underfunded over time. So it was one of the objectives of the study group was to ensure that we were able to invest at a much greater rate than Aquarian had. So Joe had mentioned Aquarian had committed in 2018 that their plan was to invest $1.5 million in capital each year. Well, in our financial analysis, we thought it was important to increase that. So in all of our financial analysis, we looked at a $2.7 million capital investment, which would be furthermore increased over time at a 5% rate every 3 years. So way more capital put it back into the system than Aquarian had been planning to do. So effectively, as we know, through a long period of time and study and work from a lot of folks, town meeting ultimately voted in favor of the acquisition. Between that time period and the actual takeover on July 31st of 2020, Aquarian continued to run the system, but there was a lot of work going on the transition itself. The town hired transition consultants to assist them. Our committee was involved, and many other folks were involved in ensuring that the transition was a smooth one. During that time period, we built financial models moving forward, once again, to ensure that the system was self-sufficient. That financial model continued to assume a 10% rate increase every 3 years. And by the way, that rate increase was also discussed throughout the evaluation process and the ultimate determination by the town to move forward with the purchase. It was displayed and shown in every financial model that the public saw. In any case, during the good husbandry period, we contracted with Suez after a diligent RFP process. We hired a new water superintendent, and on July 31st of this past year, the town assumed ownership. Suez stepped in, hired almost all the current employees of Aquarian in the water treatment plant, and began operation on that day. Because of the complexity associated with the billing process and customer service, there was a further transition period. So not until April 1st of this year was the full billing and customer service transition from Aquarian to Suez. So in effect, the town has really, or the water system has really been fully in control of its servicing from April 1st moving forward. If you don't mind moving forward, Michelle. So as mentioned, we built a 10-year model, or was a 10-year model was built moving forward, again, to ensure that the system would continue and continue to be self-sufficient, to continue to keep rates as low as possible. None of us like to increase rates, but it's important that enough revenue be produced to at least cover the expenses of the system moving forward. And you'll see this 10-year model that's been utilized shows a 10% increase each of the next for 3 years, each of the next 3-year time periods. And certainly, I believe it's the intent of the water commissioners to look at rates each year, make adjustments, but the model and the plan shows that there should be sufficient revenues for 10% increases to occur every 3 years. That also includes, again, the $2.7 million in capital investment that the system certainly needs moving forward. Then lastly, you may ask yourself, well, how does that actually apply to ratepayers? What does a 10% increase look to the individual ratepayer? We asked the folks at Suez to run some numbers for us to show that. And you'll note that the average ratepayer, now keep in mind that we bill on a quarterly basis. Mostly commercial folks are charged, some are charged commercials all charged quarterly as well. So we broke it out on a monthly basis and a quarterly basis for both residential and commercial property. You'll see here that the average residential bill on a quarterly basis should increase by about $16, average commercial bill by about $33 per quarter. You see how that's broken out on a monthly basis. But clearly every homeowner has a different sort of billing experience, but it's pretty straightforward for those folks that are looking to determine how that will impact them. Just add 10% to your current payment. Mind you, though, that we think that there's been a COVID-related impact to many of the residential homes. Certainly since we've spent most of the last year at home and working from home, I think it's fair to say that most of our water usage has gone up. So it's difficult to say what the next year is going to look like for folks, but there's probably a fairly high likelihood that most people moving forward won't use quite as much water as they had in the last year. Conversely, commercial properties used less water last year. So I would imagine that them moving forward this coming fiscal year, they'll be looking to increase, or hopefully they'll be increasing their water usage over the next year as we rebound from this pandemic. In any case, that about covers my part of it, and I know Russ is going to walk through more of the budget specifics.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it. What this slide represents is the budget that was put together and sent to the Board of Water Commissioners to be approved to send to town meeting, which was then brought up at town meeting and approved. The budget on the next slide, we're going to kind of look at the high points of the budget and what the higher costs are within the budget. So as you can see, debt services is about 47% of the budget. Contract ops is about 39% of the budget, and taxes are about 7% of the budget. So this 10% increase will really help us with the debt services, which does include our capital improvement funding that we're going to be borrowing against, typically $2.7 million per year. What are we doing with all this money? Joe? So the key initiatives for FY22 is the cost of service study will be completed. What the cost of service study will do is see how the rates are set up, how the structure of the rates are set up, and our goal is to make the water bills a little simpler to read and set up in a manner where customers can really understand where each dollar is going to. We're also going to complete the water capital master plan study, which will take each part of our operations, whether it be the wells, the treatment plant, tanks, infrastructure, hydrants, all these pieces we put into a report, and we'll have a laid out plan to replace, repair, and improve the system on a yearly basis. It'll put things in perspective of what needs to be done in the first 5 years, 10 years, and what's more important and what's less, critical to the system and what we're doing. The water main replacement program, over the next 2 years, we're going to replace about 14,000 linear feet of water main in both Hingham, Holland, and then work as we work towards Cohasset. Hydraulic model calibration, GIS system improvements that will help our operations and plan our flushing in a manner where we can make the mains cleaner and get higher quality water out to the residents of Hingham, Holland, North Cohasset. We're looking at a new water tank storage site for the next fiscal year, and then start working on a design once we site it, approval, and get that constructed. So then we can take Turkey Hill offline and clean, repair, and paint that tank. We have a source water evaluation report, which is coming through with the master plan. The Accord Pond intake needs to be replaced. Their water filter treatment plant filters need to be rehabbed. We have 2 online for July, and then next fall or early in the winter, we're going to do the other 2. We're going to do a water treatment plant evaluation. What's the best way and most effective way to operate the water treatment plant, with chemical efficiency and electrical efficiency. And we're also looking at, distribution system analysis, overall maintenance, and very important is the fire hydrant replacement program. To date, we replaced 41 fire hydrants in the system, which is a big number and a lot more than have been replaced in the past.
Yep. Wow.
Next one, Michelle. And this is just an outline of the major capital improvement projects for the next 2 years. As you can see, some have been completed, some are being bid in June, and then others will be more towards the middle of next year and towards the end of next year. So this is where the extra money is going to help support these much needed improvements in the water system.
Yep.
Thank you, Russell.
Welcome,
We just wanted to close by walking through the rate setting process that everyone can expect annually going forward. So each fall will start where the Weir River Water System annual report will be sent to all ratepayers. And then in November, the town administrator, our office, will submit the proposed water budget and rates to both the Board of Water Commissioners and the Citizens Advisory Board. In December and January, as part of our budget process, the Board of Water Commissioners and the Advisory Committee will hold public meetings on the water rates and budget. Ultimately, the Board of Water Commissioners will recommend the water budget to the Advisory Committee, and the Advisory Committee will recommend the budget to town meeting in April, and hopefully we will be back on the normal town meeting schedule in April. They will hopefully vote our water system budget. And then in May, as we're doing now, a little bit late because of town meeting this year, the Board of Water Commissioners will formally adopt the water rates for the next fiscal year, and those will take effect on July 1st. This is all part of the Weir River Water System rules and regulations. You can find those online on the Weir River Water System website. And that is it. I'll turn it back over to Tom or to Joe.
Great. Thank you very much, Michelle. And Joe, like I said at the beginning, I think that information, along with your explanation at the beginning, can help folks in town get a better understanding of both the rate structure and why it's important, and the things that we're doing. We made a lot of claims and a lot of commitments going in to the acquisition, and I think those models are being proved out, and we're seeing now. Starting to see the benefits of local ownership. So it's an exciting time. I remind everyone we've owned the entirety of the system for about 10 months. We've had access to the billing data and responsibility for billing and the like for about 2.5 months. So we are in our nascent stages of ownership for sure, but everything is going as planned or better. So it's really nice to see this process continuing.
So we are going to be looking at a proposed 10% rate increase. Are you going to present a chart that will show us what that rate increase looks like?
Sure. Michelle, you want to bring up, what is it, page 6 of 8, I think?
I will pull it up from the website where people can access it.
Yes.
Can you see this okay?
Yes.
So as we said, this is the rate structure that was already in place when we took over the system. There's several different charges that people will see reflected on their bills. To Joe's point earlier, we agree that this isn't the easiest to understand, and so are looking forward to the conclusions from the cost of service study and recommendations for a more simplified rate structure going forward.
That's right. So,
but without going into any individual category, basically, the calculation, I'm just looking at the first one, residential customers, the $3.613, just multiplying that by 1.1 will give you the 3.9743. So that is the 10% increase. It's just been done across the board for each of the rate categories. And that, so I understand how that's been calculated. Bill Ramsey, questions?
Thank you. A couple questions. Let me start with one question to you, Russ. One of the public comment we received from a citizen, and I thought it was a good question, was how does this rate increase customers? And I know that you put that slide up there of the FY22 initiatives, but would it, to answer that question to that resident, is it those capital initiatives? Are there other benefits? What do you think?
The biggest benefit is definitely capital initiatives. After being here for a whopping 10 months, I am confident that we need to do some improvements on the capital side. What that'll do is help us clean the system better, improve water quality. There are a lot of dead ends in the system, which is why I was talking more about fire hydrants, how many we're going to replace and install per year. There are sections of town we can't flush because the lines just end. So that's next on my list, and hopefully we can get some of those done in 22, but obviously 22 and 23 is look at those dead end streets and get hydrants on so you can actually flush the water out. We did a very aggressive flushing program. We did have to cut it a little bit shorter than we wanted to because it was starting to become, critical to keep the water in the homes, not on the streets. But biggest thing is water quality and safety, with fire services and fire flows and things like that. So that's two of the biggest things that this is going to help.
Great. And another question, and I'll direct it to you, Russ, but Jim might be able to help with this too, is
Yep.
The elimination of the MRAM surcharge. Is that, I know it was discussed when we were discussing the acquisition process and before we voted on it. Eliminating that MRAM charge, is that something you foresee that we could do going forward?
I would not make that commitment until we get the cost of service study, because with the capital improvements that, everybody committed to $2.7 million. Whether that goes to 3 million or a little more, but the MRAM is what paid for Aquarian's capital improvements, the 1.5 million that they promised the town and how many miles of pipe they promised the town. We're aggressively going higher than what they promised. So I would not commit to it going away, but it could be structured differently. And that's why this study is so important. This cost of service study is so important, so that we can structure everything correctly so that people understand exactly where their money is.
And the last question is, obviously, when I got calls this past week, I was telling folks, my commitment to this lower process that, I think we've discussed tonight. Do you believe that, our projection of we're not going to need to come back for another increase for 3 years? Can we, to the best of your ability, can we make a commitment to the customers and the residents that will in fact be the story, that we won't be approached with having to raise another increase within the next 3 years?
Again, that commitment's a little tough only because they've never done a capital improvement study and plan in this system. So as soon as that's done, that'll give us an idea of where we stand for going forward. I don't think making that commitment's a good idea at this point, because we don't know what these two studies are going to bring up. But like I said, the slower and lower, I understand that. I don't disagree with it. But again, until we get those studies back, we'll have a better idea where we stand.
The study's going to be in the fall. Sorry, go ahead, Jim. You didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Bill. I was just going to mention a couple things. The first is that, water usage is variable. It's not fixed. It changes from year to year. It could be, we could have a very rainy year, so outdoor watering is lower. We could have a drought and we restrict folks from being able to water. So every year there's going to be some variability in terms of the revenue that the system produces. Part of the plan is to build up some financial reserves as well. And those financial reserves will enable us to weather those courses of issues moving forward, and hopefully provide a lot more rate stabilization to customers moving forward. So while I would be reluctant to guarantee that this rates will hold for 3 years, although all of our financial models say that they will, but something may happen. And I think residents have to remember the fact that regardless of who owns the system, if there's something that's unexpected that occurs and it has to be fixed, ratepayers ultimately will pay regardless of who the owners are. Aquarian would have passed it on to ratepayers, and we may be in a position to do the same, but our financial models look very favorable that no further rate increases will need to be made for the next 3 years. But I'd hate to be in a position to guarantee that, and I don't think a ratepayer would want us to guarantee if it's not 100% certain.
Bill, and just to say on that is we want to be proactive with everything we're doing with the system, because we all know that emergency repairs cost twice as much, or not more, if more, than a planned repair. So we want to be on top of the things that need to be done to make sure we're not turning over and have to do with them in an emergency. So that's the big part of it, proactive planning.
Thank you. One more question. I remember during the acquisition process, learning a lot about what unaccounted for water is. Obviously, these capital improvements you've discussed will help us to reduce unaccounted for water. Is that correct?
That is the absolute goal, because I did put in the budget for a second leak detection this year, because we need to get on top of the unaccounted for water for several reasons, but the goal is to fix everything so that we don't have unaccounted for water.
Great. Joe, that's all I have. Thank you.
Great. So I just want to follow up on one of your questions, Bill, because you asked about the MRAM and whether or not that's going to go away. And I'm going to ask Jim or John or Tom or whoever to correct me if I'm wrong. But in many ways, it has gone away. And I mean it in this sense, that what happened in 2018 is Aquarian requested a 14% increase in rates. The DPU approved a 12% increase in rates, plus they did the 2% MRAM to handle the capital expenses. What we've done is proposed a 10% increase where the capital expenses are baked in. So there's not a 10% increase plus that 2% MRAM that was done 3 years ago. We have one increase, which is 10%, and everything's in. So conceptually, at least from my standpoint, there is no additional MRAM being charged. But to the extent that if you're asking the previously approved MRAM, if that's being removed from the base, no, it's not being removed from the base. But the process in terms of how we calculate rates and the true rate increase that the ratepayers see, there is no additional MRAM being imposed. Is that a fair statement?
That's correct. That was a surcharge that enabled Aquarian to basically get paid back on their capital investment earlier than normal, earlier than had ever been approved before. That surcharge is not going to be applied in addition to the 10%. So while people will see a line item still in their bill for this year for MRAM, it's because it's built into the base, as you mentioned, but certainly the simplification that will come out of the cost of service study and the simplification of the billing will eliminate that moving forward after this year.
Joe, I think your summary is a good one. I would just add that subsequent to the town meeting vote, but known that before the vote, that Aquarian had actually filed for an increase in MRAM surcharge from 2% to 3%. That was approved in July of 2019. And the town in its billing, both the past year and going forward, didn't even bake in that extra 1% in terms of revenue that it could have acquired if it had mimicked Aquarian's total authorization from the DPU.
Thank you. And Bill, with respect to the discussion, and I've heard it among residents, is there a guarantee that there'll be no rate increases between now until the next 3 years, and that will keep the 10%? I think the guarantee we have now is that there is no hidden agenda, that there are not additional increases cooked in the books, that if in fact there's a situation that arises that is not expected, that is not in our projections, then we're going to have to look at it. But assuming that things go as planned, we are consistent with a rate increase every 3 years at the 10% level.
Mm-hmm.
Russ, Jim, John, really thank you for the presentation. I will now ask if there are members of the public who have questions about this. I see none and I hear none. So, Bill, I am prepared to take a motion on this.
Motion to adopt the Weir River Water Systems FY22 water rates as presented.
I'll second that motion. Bill Ramsey, how do you vote?
Aye.
Joe Fisher, aye. That is approved. Thank you. Next item on our agenda, directly related to what we just discussed, is the Water Superintendent's report. Russ.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So to go online with everything that we were talking about, the bids have been posted. Well, I mean, it's been posted for the replacement of the Atlantic Ave water main. Went up today on Combine, along with Downing Street and the rest of that project. So that's going to be bid in Wampatuck. So that should be hitting the streets tomorrow morning. The plans are all ready to go, and we'll be waiting a few weeks, get all the full bids in, and then we'll award going into the next month. I've had a few conversations with Suez today. Billing and collections are going very well. We've had a few little snafus that they have corrected. The communications coming out of their office have very much improved since they took over the billing part of it. There are a few little things we are working on. Hydrant maintenance is going well. We've replaced about 5 or 6 hydrants in Hull since the last we all spoke. There is a new deputy fire chief in Hingham that just emailed me today. I'm going to meet with him tomorrow and go over the replacements for the town of Hingham, which will start right after July 1st. And there's about 10 to 12 hydrants in Hingham that have to be addressed. That'll be done both with Weir River Water System money and the town of Hingham Fire Department funds. The flushing program went fairly well. There were a few complaints of, afterwards with dirty water, which is it's all expected. I think the program coming in the fall will go a little smoother because it's only one side of the town. But then after that, we're hoping to gear more towards a unidirectional flushing program, which may happen in FY22, but if not, it'll definitely happen in FY23. There's still a little more valve work we have to do to make sure we can make that program run smoothly. Besides that, that's about all I have in the actual monthly report. I got draft today, so the Board of Water Commissioners and everyone else will have that report within the next couple of days. I just got to review it myself and get it out to you guys.
Great. One of the things that'd be helpful that if you could include in each of your reports is a discussion on water restrictions that may be applicable to the residents. Where are we?
You got me last week on this too. So yeah, so right now we are in water conservation. It's voluntary. We're going to run it through the rest of this month. We're kind of recouping from the flushing program. I will look at the Acrid Pond levels and the levels at each of the individual wells to see where we'll head into for July. But at this point, we'll just keep on with the, it's all voluntary restrictions. So it's odd even watering and everybody just trying to conserve as much as they possibly can.
Great. Bill, any questions?
I've learned a lot about water operations the last 7 days, but I do have one question. Russ, maybe about a month or so ago, you came to us about the I think it was a filter replacement at the plant.
Yes. Yep.
How's that going?
That is being started hopefully July, I think it's July 9th. I'll have an update tomorrow from Friday from Suez in our weekly meeting. But what's holding it up is the media itself was being shipped and got tied up in some kind of, shipping nightmare. But it should be here very soon. The contract is ready to go. As soon as he starts, he's going to pull all the media out of number 3, replace the media, then pull it from 4 and look at 4's under drain. If that's all good to go, we'll drop the media right in number 4 and then start planning for the other 2 in the fall.
Great, thank you.
Great. Any members of the public have questions?
I do, Joe.
Yes, sir.
Russ, did I hear you properly that 42 hydrants have been replaced so far?
41. Yep.
That's an incredible number. I am blown away that has happened in the time frame that the town has owned the system, because I can tell you the number of hydrants being replaced annually prior to that is so much smaller. I actually didn't think I heard you right. And they are not cheap, let me tell you. We learned that when we started the transition process after town meetings vote. They're pretty expensive.
So I got to give the kudos to the town of Hull, Chief Russo, Deputy Chief Frazier, and the town, the Board of Selectmen in Hull did get a grant for some of them. So we aren't paying for all of them, but we have been instrumental in working with the town to get them done with us controlling valves and things like that. But we've been working well together to get those done. And I actually did meet with Cohasset last week. And I'm going to look at a few in Cohasset starting after July 1st. So it's a great number. But I do have to give, a shout out to the town of Hull. They have been very aggressive with, because they do own the hydrants into a certain extent, certain thing. So, but working together, we have replaced 42 fire hydrants in all the towns, 41, sorry.
Great job.
Russ, how is that going? Are there problems, neighbors being affected with flooding, or is everything under control? Or if there are problems, people know how to reach you to get it addressed?
Yep. Periodically we'll have a problem with the shutdown. Maybe the valves aren't working properly. But again, this work also starts to bring that stuff out so you can get it addressed as quickly as possible. If anyone has any issues or flooding, they can send an email to me. I'll go right on the website. My email's right there. They can send it to Suez customer service. But if you have a real issue with anything that's going on operationally, feel free to reach out to me. And if I can redirect you to someone else or take care of it myself, I will absolutely do that.
Great. Really appreciate your efforts, Russ, and your crew. Thank you. Tom or Michelle, anything to add on the superintendent report?
Nothing. Thank you.
Great. So now I will open up for comments from members of the public on items not on the agenda. Are there anyone who has a comment on an item not on the agenda for this evening? Seeing none, hearing none. Tom, is there anything else that you see we need to cover?
Nothing tonight.
Great. Bill, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, all in favor, Bill Ramsey,
Aye.
Joe Fisher, aye. We are adjourned. Thank you all so much.
Thank
Good night,
you,
everyone.